whether you have a client or not, you have to pay. So say I didn't get a client this month. So they don't have anything to take that percentage off of. However, there's a minimum amount you have to pay regardless of whether you get a client or not. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Pivot and Profit with Priscilla. Today, I want to talk about the pros and cons of purchasing a home health care franchise. One of my my second business was I got into home health care through a franchise. The franchise was called Nurse Next Door. It was based out of Canada and it was a senior home health care franchise. I am currently in pediatric home health care, but that is because I sold that franchise and I built my own pediatric home health care agency. So today I want to talk about some of the things that went well during my franchising experience and some of the things I did not like during that franchising experience. So let's start with some pros. One, out of the gate, we started with training. That was very beneficial for me because I am not a nurse. I am not someone that has ever been in the healthcare industry. So I was able to get training by purchasing a franchise. We flew out to Canada and we did a week of training in Vancouver. The training was not extensive. However, the training did give me some insight into the industry itself. We were in class. There were presentations from franchise owners. I got to meet other people that were joining the business as well. We went out, we did some marketing, just basically looking at how they built their brand and how they run their company. So that was beneficial for somebody that didn't understand the industry at all. Again, most of the people in the training program weren't in the healthcare industry. Maybe one of the persons was actually a nurse, but everybody else was entrepreneurs like myself. So also just getting to meet the team that would be supporting me. We got to meet the president, the vice president. We went to dinner with them. We got to meet the back-end team that handled the support and handled some of the calls. So that was very helpful. That leads me to another pro. The company had structure. The structure was already built in. They helped us get our licensing. They had a binder that had all the processes, all the procedures, all the forms, everything we needed to run that company within regulation was already created. So we got access to all of that and I didn't have to create it from scratch. Also, they had a team of people that would take intake calls, that would take calls from potential new clients for us. They would put them in the system and then we'd get a notification that, hey, somebody in your territory. That's how franchises work. You have to purchase a territory, which is an area. Somebody in your territory called and they want services. So they would take those calls, they would put that person's information in the system, and then that would be passed along to me so I can reach out to that person and schedule a meeting or just have a conversation about what they were looking for. That was very helpful starting out. Having that structure and not having to worry about meeting regulations, meeting standards, having processes, having employee handbook, things like that, just kind of helped me focus on getting new clients. So we talked about the training, we talked about the structure. Now let's talk about support. They had a support team. The support team would give us weekly calls to see how we were doing. When they would call, I could kind of vent my frustrations or ask questions about what wasn't going right or what did go well for me. It kind of felt helpful to talk to somebody and have somebody say, oh, that was great. You did a good job. Maybe next week you should try this. I'd have conversations with them about setting up marketing events or going out and doing marketing on my own, and just having that support and having that kind of attaboy just kind of gave me a boost sometimes that I really needed. Also being able to ask questions and say, hey, I did an interview this week. It didn't go well. Or I hired somebody and this didn't work out. And for them to say, okay, well, we have our HR person that you can talk to and they give you some tips on how to do this better. Or we have somebody that you can do a mock interview with and we can give you some tips on what you should be asking when you're interviewing people. That training, that support, and that structure, that's what you're buying into when you're buying a franchise. You're buying a ready-made, essentially branded business that you kind of just have to come in and find the clients because you have a brand, you have a name. For us, that didn't work so much in the US because that brand was just built in Canada. In the US, the name wasn't necessarily known. So we basically had to follow rules and guidelines of a brand that hadn't transitioned to the US yet. So now that leads me into the cons. Here are a couple things that I did not like. One, the structure being built can be twofold. It can be a good thing and it can be a double-edged sword. It can be a bad thing. There is a structure and there is a brand built. That brand comes with rules in itself. There are things that you can and cannot do. You're not able to kind of go out here and just be your own creative entrepreneur and just try things. One of the things that we were required to do is we were required to purchase a car and wrap that car. We had gotten an SBA loan, so we were able to buy into the franchise and kind of spend money on marketing. And that was one of the requirements. So we purchased a Kia. We went through the company that they had to have the Kia wrapped. The Kia was wrapped with all of their branding. The car was also wrapped with their 1-800 number, not a direct line to me. So say I drove that car through someone else's territory. I'm in Atlanta. My territory was Atlanta for the most part. So let's say I drove through another county where somebody else had a territory. Well, that customer was going to call that 1-800 number and that other person was going to get that customer because their call center filtered out where the customer goes based on their location. So I would never get that call, even though my advertisement and my car was the one that attracted that customer. So again, there's rules and regulations that you have to follow. Another one of their rules is that we couldn't use Medicare or Medicaid. Being in the US, Medicare and Medicaid is a huge source of financial help for seniors in our healthcare system. Canada doesn't have that. So we had to rely on private pay customers. That's customers that pay for home healthcare services out of their pocket. When you're charging $20 to $25 an hour, that can add up. So now you have customers limiting the amount of hours they want. They don't want somebody to work for 8 hours a day because they can't pay $200 a day. So they only want someone to work for 4 hours a day. Well, now it's difficult for me to find a caregiver that only want to work for 4 hours. So the limits around the brand kind of felt restricting after a while. Another con for me was the royalties. Now, I did my research and I made sure I was buying into a company that had low royalties. Their royalties was not as high as some other franchises. However, one thing I did not realize is that your royalty fee may be 7%. However, that support system, the people that take on those calls, there's a fee for them. That's a technology fee. That's now maybe another 3%. You also have other fees that ramp up your percentage, and that percentage is taken off of your gross sales. So my fees could be, the royalty may have started at 7%, but by the time you add on the other fees, they also had a service, a CRM service that we were required to use. There was a fee for that. So now my fees have gone from 7% to maybe 10, 12, 15% sometimes with franchises because I didn't factor in the other percentages that were added on to the royalty. So my gross amount is hit with those fees. Another thing is that whether you have a client or not, you have to pay. So say I didn't get a client this month. So they don't have anything to take that percentage off of. However, there's a minimum amount you have to pay regardless of whether you get a client or not. So I still had to pay my minimum, which can be anywhere from $700, $1,000, $1,500, whatever that franchise's minimum is, you have to pay that whether you have a client or not. Say you do get a client. However, that client only wants part-time hours and the percentage on what you earned doesn't meet that minimum. Well, you have to add on the extra to meet the minimum. So it's not just about the royalties when you're looking into franchising. You have to see what other fees are tacked onto those royalties. And you have to find out if you have to meet a minimum every month. Because again, you're starting a brand new business. You have to find clients. So if you don't have any, you still have money to pay to that franchise. Finally, the last con that I have is if the business doesn't work, you can't abandon it. You can't close shop and say, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not making any money. I'm actually losing money. I can't get it. I don't like this business. I was wrong. You sign a contract, and that contract can be anywhere from 10 to 20 years. And another thing about that contract is sometimes they have non-compete clauses. So even if you get out of the contract, you can't go start another business in that same industry. One of the only ways sometimes to get out of that contract is to sell the franchise. It's hard to sell a failing business. I don't know who you're going to sell it to. Nobody wants a business that's not making money. So one of the things I did was I sold my territory to another franchise owner. That franchise owner wanted to expand their territory. They wanted a bigger territory. So I sold my business to her. However, I wasn't able to sell the business for any profit. I basically had to just sell it to get out of it. So I offered her an amount. I offered her what it would cost me to get out. They charged me a fee to get out. I offered to sell it to her for that amount. Well, I made the mistake of mentioning that to another territory owner, and they offered her a lesser amount. So I basically gave her the franchise just to get out of the situation. So there's some things you need to be careful about. There's some things you need to understand when you're buying into a franchise. It can be good and it can be bad. But I hope this helped you. I hope you got a better understanding of what franchising looks like, and stay tuned for more. Appreciate you guys for watching.